welcome back. I'm Ulysses Arrow with another episode of Time Machine Toronto. We're the show that deconstructs Toronto. It's urban archaeology with a glimpse into the future. We trip the light fantastic through space and time into the vast unknown. Ready for some fun? Follow me. I'm Ulysses Arrow. We're going to start here in Graffiti Alley near Queen Street West and Spadina, and then we're going to meander through the Schmatza district over to Chinatown and finally to the AGO, the Art Gallery of Ontario, and right behind it, the Grange, which has some of the oldest surviving structures, buildings in Toronto. And finally, we're going to wind our way up Spadina over to Kensington Market with its artists, artisans, and cool vintage clothing shops. Follow me. I'm Ulysses Arrow. Graffiti Alley has been around since forever, but for the longest time the city of Toronto was discouraging artists from coming down here and tagging walls and buildings with their murals, until finally the local Business Improvement Association got behind the artists and had City Hall pass a bylaw that has allowed Graffiti Alley to flourish as it has for more than 10 years now. And it's a stretch of the city just south of Queen Street West that goes for about 4 or 5 city blocks, bubbling and bursting with creativity and energy for every taste and palette there is. Behind me is perhaps the most interesting mural, and it's kind of a storybook mural of modern Toronto, today's Toronto. And it's got so many elements happening all at the same time, beginning with Gord Downey of the Tragically Hip in his retro Jaws t-shirt at one end. On the opposite end, you've got the former mayor, Rob Ford, atop a moose, the crack-smoking Rob Ford, who also, by the way, had some great ideas when it came to subways. Both he and Gord have passed. And then as you go higher, there are all sorts of other bits and elements relating to Toronto's storybook story, including Sam the Record Man, the famous neon sign that hung over the record retailer for decades, the CN Tower, of course, with a chimp climbing it, and a jay with a blue jay with a baseball cap, and it just goes on and on and on. The storybook story of Toronto in Graffiti Alley. Time zones ain't no barrier, space ain't no thing. I'm Ulysses with the time machine, the Lord of the Ring. I traveled to 4000 BC for coffee with touch. Then it's back to Graffiti Alley. If that ain't enough, Borneo calls, I gots to go. See you later, Socrates. It's time for my show. ringing off the hook. Oh, what? The call's for you. As you come out of Graffiti Alley, you find yourself in Toronto's fashion district. We're on Spadina and Richmond Street West. This was the Schmatza district, and the statue above me is of a thimble, a sewing thimble, not a funny-looking hat. This was the center of the garment industry in Toronto for over 100 years, wholesaling, manufacturing, including furriers that made expensive luxury coats from fox and sable, wolf and beaver, until all that went out of fashion. 80% of the Jewish population was centered around here, with Yiddish bookshops, theaters, all the rest of it. Today, the population is mainly artists, musicians, designers, and professionals. The warehouses all around have been converted into luxury condos, and condo towers are springing up like mushrooms after a rain. Toronto's fashion district. Our next stop is a little way up the street, Chinatown. Here we are in the middle of Chinatown with echoes of Graffiti Alley right beside me. This Chinatown, also known as West Chinatown, the biggest of the two that Toronto has, was created in the 1950s when the city of Toronto expropriated the land on which the original Chinatown sat so it could build the new City Hall on what is now Nathan Phillips Square. That pushed the Chinese community right up against the Jewish quarter, and they were competing for space. Chinatown is still full of the usual things you would expect, like the Chinese restaurants and the traditional herbalists for Chinese medicine and the curio shops. But at one time, it was also chock-a-block with mahjong gaming parlors and opium dens run by people styled on Fu Manchu. site of a former opium den. At one time, there were many of these scattered around Chinatown, all operating under the nose of the authorities because you could not enter an opium den without the accompaniment of a member. Eventually, however, the lid was blown off the opium dens and the secret was out. Fines began to be levied, modest at first, around $100, but they increased, and eventually opium dens were eradicated from Chinatown. A couple of points of interest here. One, I found here a glass pipe, which looks to be something left here by a crack or crystal meth addict. Echoes of the opium den that once stood here. And similarly, a skull left here, I think, as a warning by the Chinese community that the opium dens should not be allowed to resurrect themselves ever.